Story structure, story definition, and main idea criteria. Your story, the body of your speech presentation, should have a traceable arc, discernible through a specific sequence of events. In order for this arc to be clearly conveyed to your audience, it must have the following 4 recognizable elements: exposition, initial conflict, climax, and tag or coda. Either term is fine. Let's define these one at a time. The exposition. The exposition should contain brief, descriptive details that help to set up the story to have a greater emotional effect on the audience. It's where you might describe the nature of the relationship between you and another person who you interact with in the story. Or you might give some background information that would help set up for maximum impact that climax when it comes. Okay, it should be brief though. This is a story and the exposition is descriptive, so you want to keep it brief. If I were to tell a story about an argument that I had with a friend, I might describe to you in the exposition the nature of our relationship. Did we fight all the time? Or have we never had a harsh word between us? The initial conflict, that's where the sequence of events begins. It is a specific event that causes an open-ended situation to occur which must be resolved, for better or for worse, in the short term. So you get hired, you get fired, you break your arm, you move to a new living space. Those are some examples of events that could be an initial conflict in a story. The climax of a story. A specific event that resolves, for better or for worse, the open-ended situation begun with the initial conflict. The fourth element of this story structure model is the tag or coda, and that is brief descriptive information that ties up secondary details that came up in the story. Non-essential details that the audience may be curious about even though they are secondary to the point of the story. And again, it should be brief, as should the exposition. An audience is much more likely to continue following your story if they know the time frame of the story. So I remind you that for our purposes, the time frame of a story is defined as the period of time between the moment that is your initial conflict and the moment that is your climax. So in order to know the time frame of your story, you must first organize the events of your story into a coherent time sequence. Story. Well, what is a story? Let's define it for our purposes. A story, for our purposes, is a specific sequence of events that take place within a specific time frame during which a conflict occurs and is eventually resolved. A story is not merely a general description of an ongoing situation. Please make sure that the content you're thinking of as a story is not merely a general description. If it is, you might be able to develop it into a story if you focus on one particular time that this ongoing situation occurred, and try to develop a specific sequence of events that happened on that particular occasion, leading up to the resolution of that occurrence, not necessarily a resolution of the problem for all time. Main idea criteria and how the main idea relates to story structure. The two should go hand in hand. A story should appeal to your audience on 2 levels. It should reveal something about you, and it should also give your audience a new perspective with regard to some aspect of their own lives. The point, the main idea of your story. It is this second element which will make your story interesting to your audience, even though you may be speaking to a group of strangers who have never met you before and may never see you again after the presentation. It's that universality of the point of the story, the main idea. If your main idea is well developed, you will often have a point to your story that is twofold. One version of the point may be more literal and only apply to someone in exactly your circumstances, while the other version might be a more philosophical point that is analogous to a broader range of circumstances. Whenever you can, try to use as your main idea the one that fits the latter description, the one that could apply to a broader range of circumstances. Story structure, story definition, and main idea criteria.